Imagine standing outside right now, in the middle of winter, minus 10 degrees, snow on the ground, wind cutting through everything you are wearing. Now imagine you are not at home. You are in a foreign country, 6,000 miles from Rome, in a place the locals call the end of the world. And your commander just told you, you are staying here for the entire winter. No heated buildings waiting for you. No modern gear. Just you, your unit, and everything Rome taught you. And somehow, every single man in that army survived. This is how they did it. The Roman army did not stop when winter came. Most ancient armies did. The Greeks went home, the Celts retreated into their settlements, the Germanic tribes waited for spring. But Rome did not wait. Rome could not afford to wait, because holding an empire the size of Europe meant keeping soldiers in the field year-round, in Britain, in Germany, in the frozen borderlands along the Danube. And the question every historian eventually asks is this: how did 6,000 men not simply freeze to death? The answer is not what most people expect. It was not just toughness, it was not just discipline. It was engineering, clothing science, nutrition, and a level of institutional organization that the ancient world had never seen before and would not see again for over 1,000 years. Let me take you through exactly how it worked. The first thing the Roman army built when winter was approaching was something called the castra hiberna, the winter camp. And I want you to understand something before I describe it. This was not a collection of tents huddled around a fire. This was a fortress, a fully engineered, semi-permanent structure designed specifically to keep 6,000 men alive in freezing temperatures. Here is what made it remarkable. Inside that camp, soldiers did not sleep alone. 8 men shared a single room, every single night, a room called a contubernium. And that was not accidental. Roman military architects understood something that modern scientists have confirmed. The human body generates roughly the same heat as a 100-watt light bulb. 8 men in a small, insulated room generate enough combined body heat to raise the interior temperature significantly above freezing, even when everything outside is buried in snow. The rooms themselves were built to hold that heat in. The walls were often double-layered timber, the gap between the 2 layers packed tightly with straw. The same principle as modern insulation, 2,000 years before anyone invented the word insulation. The roofs were built at a specific angle, not random, calculated, steep enough so that heavy snow would slide off rather than accumulate and collapse the structure under its weight. And the floors were raised off the ground, because the Roman engineers understood that cold ground pulls heat downward, and moisture from frozen earth will rot the timber and get into everything. A raised floor kept both problems out. But here is the detail that genuinely stopped me when I first read about it. In the more permanent winter installations, the forts that housed troops for months at a time, Roman soldiers built hypocausts beneath the floor. A hypocaust is an underfloor heating system, a furnace built into the base of the structure that circulates hot air through channels beneath the raised floor. The entire floor becomes a radiator, heating the room from below. The Romans did not invent this for their villas and bathhouses. They used it on military campaign, in temporary forts, in the middle of a German winter. That is not survival. That is engineering at a level most of the ancient world could not even imagine. Now, here is the part that surprises almost everyone. When most people picture a Roman soldier, they picture bare legs, short tunic, open sandals. That image is not wrong for summer, but in winter, the Roman army dressed in a way that would look completely familiar to anyone who has ever spent time in genuinely cold weather. Start from the bottom. Their standard sandals, the caligae, were replaced in winter with heavy leather boots, and inside those boots, multiple layers of thick wool socks, sometimes an additional leather covering over the boot itself to block wind and moisture. Moving up, long wool trousers. The Romans called them brachie. They borrowed this idea from the northern Germanic and Celtic tribes they were fighting, because those tribes had been surviving in that climate for generations, and Rome was practical enough to learn from them. Over the trousers, a thick wool tunic, not linen, wool, because wool retains heat even when it gets wet, a property that linen does not have. And in winter campaign conditions, getting wet was not a question of if, it was a question of when. Over the tunic, a heavy wool cloak called the sagum. This cloak was treated to be water-resistant. It fastened at the shoulder and could be pulled up over the head in a storm. And around the neck, a wool scarf. 5 layers of wool, from the feet to the neck, on a soldier who was still expected to march, dig, fight, and build in that gear. That is not the image most history books give you. But that is what the archaeological evidence and the written records both confirm. Staying warm in winter is not just about what you wear or where you sleep. It is about what you eat. And the Roman army understood this in a way that most ancient forces completely missed. In summer, the standard Roman soldier's diet was wheat-based. Grain porridge, hardtack, flatbread, practical, portable, and calorie-dense enough for marching. But in winter, that changed. The Romans knew, not in scientific language, but in practical terms, that the body burns more calories in cold weather simply to maintain its core temperature. So the winter diet was supplemented with fat. Cured pork fat specifically, called lardum, high-calorie, long-lasting, easy to transport, and available across most of the empire's territories. Alongside that, the campaign warehouses, the horia, were stocked with specific provisions for winter. Salt-cured cheeses that would not spoil in cold temperatures, pepper and cumin, not just for flavor, but because both were understood to have warming and medicinal properties, and sour wine, acetum, which served as both a daily drink and an antiseptic for wounds and skin exposure. This was not random. Someone planned this supply chain. Someone calculated how much fat and protein 6,000 men needed to survive 3 months of European winter, and then organized a logistics network across thousands of miles to deliver it. The Roman army did not survive winter by being tough. They survived it by being organized in a way that no other force in the ancient world came close to matching. But there was one more piece of this that most people never talk about. The Roman army's greatest weapon against winter was not a building or a cloak or a bowl of pork fat. It was movement. Roman commanders understood something fundamental about cold weather and large groups of men. Idle soldiers get cold. Cold soldiers get sick. Sick soldiers die. So the Roman army trained through winter. Full weapons drills, formation running, obstacle courses built inside the camp, equipment maintenance that required physical effort. The training had a specific term, armatura, and it was not optional. It was not reduced in winter. In many records, commanders actually increased the intensity of winter training because movement keeps blood circulating, because warm muscles do not freeze, because a soldier who is physically tired sleeps better in a cold room than a soldier who has been sitting still all day. And then there were the doctors. Every Roman legion had trained military doctors called medici, and in winter, they had a specific responsibility that went beyond treating battle wounds. They walked the ranks, every day, checking feet. Frostbite is silent. It begins in the extremities, the toes, the fingers, the ears, and a soldier with frostbitten feet cannot march, cannot fight, cannot build. So the medici checked, and when they found early signs of cold exposure, they treated it immediately. Warm oil compresses to restore circulation, honey applied to damaged skin, because even in the 1st century, Roman medicine understood that honey prevents infection and open wounds. 6,000 men, someone was looking after each one of them. Not out of kindness alone, out of military logic, because a dead soldier is an expensive investment that Rome could not afford to waste. Here is what I want you to take away from this. The Roman army did not conquer half the known world because its soldiers were harder than everyone else. They were not. They were human beings, same as the Germanic warriors they fought, same as the Celtic tribes they pushed back, same as the Dacians along the Danube who were just as tough and just as willing to fight in winter. What made the difference was that Rome thought about things that other armies did not think about. 8 men in a room for the body heat, raised floors for the moisture, angled roofs for the snow load, hot air circulating beneath the floor, wool on every part of the body, fat in the diet through the coldest months, doctors checking feet every morning. None of these things are dramatic. None of them make a great movie scene. But they kept 6,000 men alive through a German winter for hundreds of years, in places the rest of the ancient world could not even reach. And that is why the Roman Empire lasted as long as it did. Not because of the battles, because of the details. If this taught you something this morning that you did not know yesterday, share this video, because this is the kind of history that deserves to be told properly.